The friend who seems like a completely different person in every room is usually the most socially perceptive person you know. Here is why. You walk out of one conversation and into another. Different person, different dynamic. Something shifts inside you. The way you talk, the jokes you make, the version of yourself you reach for. It is all different. On a harder day, you catch yourself mid-sentence and wonder, who is this? Is this actually me? You go home trying to locate the real version, the consistent one. And the harder you look, the more you wonder if there is one. Maybe you have heard the word fake, two-faced, a chameleon, and not in a good way. The implication is always the same, that a consistent self is a real self and an adaptable one is a hollow one. Society calls this inauthenticity. The diagnosis is wrong. You are not a chameleon without a core. You are a prism. Think about what a prism does. White light passes through it, and what comes out on the other side is not white light anymore. It is every color the light was always carrying. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. All of them were inside the original beam. The prism did not add them. It revealed them. Your nervous system works the same way. Every room you walk into is a different angle of light, and what it reveals is a different frequency of who you already are. The playful version that comes out with old friends, the precise version that emerges in professional settings, the quiet, careful version that shows up around people who need steadiness. You are not becoming someone different. You are refracting. And every color that appears has always been part of the same beam. The question was never which one is the real you. They all are, and there is one part of you that never changes no matter which room you walk into. I will get to what it is. The problem is not that you have too many colors. The problem is that nobody ever explained what the prism was doing. But here is the part that changes everything. To understand what is actually happening, we need to look at the psychology of self-monitoring. In 1974, psychologist Snyder developed a framework for understanding how people regulate their own behavior in social situations. He identified a measurable trait he called self-monitoring, using what is now a validated psychological instrument called the self-monitoring scale, still used in social psychology research today. Low self-monitors tend to remain more consistent across situations. They show less adjustment from one social context to another. They place greater value on expressing themselves consistently, regardless of who is in the room. High self-monitors are fundamentally different. They are exquisitely attuned to the social environment. They read the room constantly and instinctively. They pick up on what is needed, what is expected, what will land well, and they adjust. Their tone shifts, their language adapts, the version of themselves they lead with changes based on who is in the room. Snyder's research found that high self-monitors are not more fake than low self-monitors. They are more responsive. The difference is not one of authenticity, it is one of social perceptiveness. High self-monitoring is associated with stronger social awareness and greater sensitivity to interpersonal cues. Later research extended this further. High self-monitors often become the connective tissue in social networks, the people who move fluidly between different groups and hold them together, precisely because they can read each room instead of bringing the same version of themselves into everyone. You are not presenting differently in different rooms because you have no core. You are presenting differently because your nervous system is sensitive enough to detect what each room actually needs, and it responds accordingly. That is not hollowness. That is attunement at a level most people are not capable of, but that is only the first layer of what is actually happening. The second layer comes from sociologist Erving Goffman, whose work on what he called the dramaturgical model changed how we understand social behavior entirely. Goffman proposed that all human social interaction involves performance, not performance in the sense of deception, performance in the sense of presentation. Every person in every social context has what he called a front stage, the version of yourself you present to the world in a given situation, and a backstage, the private self that exists when the social performance is not required. Think of the difference between how a teacher speaks in front of a classroom and how the same person talks to their spouse an hour later. Both are real. Neither is the mask. His central insight was not that performance is fake. His insight was that performance is universal. Everyone does it. And neuroscience supports exactly why. Your brain runs a constant simulation of the people around you, using what researchers call the mentalizing network. This is a system involving the prefrontal cortex and temporal regions that models other people's intentions, feelings, and expectations in real time. This same network activates when you read a novel and track what a character knows that another character does not, or when you anticipate how a joke will land before you tell it. It is one of the most consistently replicated findings in social neuroscience. The more attuned your nervous system, the more actively this network runs. Your front stage shifts more visibly, not because you are dishonest, but because your mentalizing network is working harder. You are not uniquely inauthentic. You are uniquely attuned. And the discomfort you feel is not the sign of a fragmented self. It is the sign of a nervous system that is doing more social processing than most people are even aware of. And this is the part that changes how you see every room you will ever walk into. The third concept is where the reframe becomes a genuine structural advantage. Psychologist Patricia Linville studied what she called self-complexity. Her research found that the self is not a single unified structure. It is a collection of self-aspects, different roles, different relationships, different contexts. Each one activates a different configuration of who you are. The professional self, the friend self, the child of your parents' self, the person you are when no one is watching, and Linville's research found something that runs completely counter to the anxiety you have been carrying. Having multiple self-aspects can provide a buffer against stress, because when one self-aspect comes under threat, setbacks in that area do not automatically spill into every other area of life. Her original studies found that people with more differentiated self-structures tended to show smaller mood swings and were more buffered against stress after difficult life events, compared to people whose sense of self was built around only one or two dominant roles. The person who is only ever one version of themselves has no such buffer. When that version is challenged, the whole structure is challenged. But when you have a rich, differentiated self, you have a network of stability that a simpler self cannot access. Researchers often describe this as a buffering effect created by self-complexity. And what the research shows is that the very thing you have been treating as a liability, the fact that you seem to be different things in different contexts, is actually one of your most significant psychological assets. You have not been losing yourself in different rooms. You have been building something most people do not have, a self with depth. Understanding the mechanism reframes the experience, but understanding it does not fix the anxiety on its own, so here is what does. These three tools help. The first tool is called the thread. Every time you feel like a different person in a different room, your nervous system is scanning for evidence of discontinuity. What it is missing is the thread that runs through all the versions. The thread is a single sentence that captures your constant, not your personality, not your interests, your constant. The thing that is true of you in every room, in every version, in every context. It might be, I care about getting things right, or I notice what other people miss, or I want the people I am with to feel understood. Write it down. One sentence. When you do this, you give your default mode network, the brain's background processing system, an anchor to return to instead of spiraling into identity questions. Naming the constant activates your prefrontal cortex and creates a stable reference point your nervous system can locate under pressure. This is not your whole self. It is the beam before it hits the prism. When identity anxiety appears, return to the thread. Not to flatten yourself back into one version, but to remember what runs through all of them. The second tool is called the Room Audit. When you leave a social situation feeling unsettled about who you were in it, run this check before the anxiety spiral starts. Ask 3 questions. Did I act in a way that violated my own values in that room? Did I say something I did not mean in order to make someone comfortable? Did I perform a version of myself that felt actively dishonest? If the answer to all 3 is no, you are not being fake, you are being flexible. Asking these specific questions shifts processing from your amygdala, which flags social change as threat, to your prefrontal cortex, which can accurately assess whether a real boundary was crossed. The room audit is not just reflection, it is a neurological redirect. Adaptation is healthy. Betrayal is what actually warrants attention. Most of what you are calling inauthenticity is adaptation, and this is where it stops being about managing anxiety and starts being about proof. The third tool is called the continuity map. Once a month, write down 5 things that were true of you in every significant interaction that month, not the things that changed, the things that did not, the care you brought into every conversation, the way you listened, the values you kept returning to. Over time, tracking these patterns creates new neural pathways through a process called neuroplasticity. Your salience network, the brain's attention filtering system, begins to scan for continuity rather than defaulting to what changed. The continuity map builds a picture of your actual constants, not the performed ones, the embedded ones, the things that show up regardless of which room you are in. That is what a self actually is, not sameness, continuity. So here is what is actually true. You are not fake, you are not hollow. You are not a person without a core, you are a prism, and every version of you that appears in a different room is a color that was always inside the beam. High self-monitoring is not inauthenticity, it is attunement. The dramaturgical self is not performance, it is human. Self-complexity is not fragmentation, it is architecture. And remember the one part of you that never changes no matter which room you walk into. That is your thread. Find it. Run the room audit. Build the continuity map. And the next time you walk out of a room wondering which one of those versions was actually you, remember this. You were never losing yourself. You were showing different colors of the same light. Now, if you are watching this and realizing that the shifting is not just about adapting to different rooms, but about something deeper, a fear that if people saw the real version, they would not stay, that is exactly what the next video is about. Because the identity question and the loneliness question are often the same question. Click this video right here. I will see you over there.